So in this video we're going to have a go at drawing this mug. It's quite a good shape because we're going to be working on different size ellipses in the isometric drawing. So we're going from a very small ellipse there to the top opening diameter of the cup there. We've also got the handle here, which is quite an interesting shape. You can see it's kind of got a thickened area and then this kind of quite organic shape, and where it transitions with the cup is going to be interesting on the mug. It's going to be interesting in this particular case. So we're going to have a go at doing that. Now, what I'm going to do with this, I see some people work from sort of 2D into 3D when they're working out the shapes, and that's what we're going to have a go at doing in this video first. So if I just start with a little sketch, and just like before, our kind of first line is going to determine where the size and the proportion of the cups, or what that's going to be. So just looking at the cup here, I've drawn one line across the top, which is going to be kind of this point from here to here on the actual cup here. And if we just transfer that down, we can see it's almost as wide as it is high. So it's effectively like a square that we're drawing. So that distance going across the top, we can kind of transfer that down. It's a little bit longer, so we're going to just take it to there. Now, what we're doing here is we're creating a box. Now, when you create boxes, I've talked about this in earlier videos, what we're doing here is crating, the technique of crating, crate being like a box. So I'm going to do this and create the box. Now, looking at this shape now, we can see it goes down almost flat to around about this point where this radii then starts at the bottom. So that distance there, we're looking about probably about 2/3 of the way down this edge here. We're looking at an almost straight shape. In fact, it comes in very, very slightly, but we're looking at something kind of like this. And I'm going to transfer that measurement across to the other side like this when I'm doing that. And then at this point here, that's when this radii really kind of starts to come into play along the bottom there, and it's coming into a bottom part of the cup, which is probably just under half of the size. So again, I'm going to put across my cup here and come down to the middle to show you where my midpoint is there, and then it's probably about this sort of distance here in the cup. So if we put that on either side, we're looking at a base diameter for that ellipse of about there, and then that allows me to kind of mark in those two radii there. Okay, now looking at the side of the cup, the handle, we can see the sort of height of the handle, the height of the handle there is about 2/3 again of the height of the cup. I'm going to estimate where it kind of stops and starts, but I'd say it starts around about there, and about 2/3 distance, this sort of distance here, is going to come down. It looks like it's around about where that radii starts. There is also where the cup ends. So once again, I'm going to think about that handle and draw it inside a square. We can see it starts there, but it goes up just a fraction, so it probably goes up a little bit higher. I'm going to draw my square a little bit higher, and in terms of how far it comes out of the cup, we'll just do a brief measurement there by hand, but it's about it's just over 1/3 probably the size of the cup there, so I'm going to estimate it to be around about there. Okay, so within this shape here is where my hand was going to be. Now we can see it starts at this low point here, and it kind of comes up like that, and then comes around to form that kind of arc there. So we're just kind of drawing that in like this, and then it comes down more of a sort of a sweeping, more gradual shape, because it kind of flattens out, and then it opens out a little bit to a bit of a bulge at the bottom. So we're looking at a shape kind of like that for the handle, and then again it goes kind of fat to a more consistent thickness going around the shape like this, and then once again when it comes into the cup, it kind of thickens out a little bit and flattens off in that. So there's a kind of an okay sort of depiction of that. I think just looking at the bottom, it kind of does taper out just a little bit, goes a little bit flat at the bottom like this. I'd say maybe my cup is a little bit squat, it could probably be a tiny bit higher, but I'm quite happy with that as a starting point. Okay, so in the earlier part of the video, we created this two-dimensional profile showing the sort of side elevation of the mug, this elevation here. Okay, so we're going to start now on our 3D drawing. So we're going to start as we normally do with an isometric sketch by drawing our lines kind of going up, creating the first vertical line, and two lines coming off around about 30 degrees there from one side and to the other side of the sketch like this, trying to keep these symmetrical to each other. So there's the base of our sketch. We should have 90 degrees and 30 degrees going from there at the top. Okay, so this sets the scene, and what we're going to do, we talked about creating, when we was doing the side profile for this, we're going to create a crate or a box effectively that fits the object inside. So I'm going to start first of all by deciding how large the height's going to be for my first product like this, and I'm going to draw it up like this and create a line there. So that basically sets the scene for the whole drawing, okay, because it all has to be in proportion with each other. So it's working about where you are on the page and making sure you've got enough size and space to fit this in. I'm then going to draw in the rest of my crate. So I'm going to draw one line, trying to keep these very important at the start, to keep these parallel with each other, and the same across the other side. So I'm practicing the lines, ghosting the lines before I bring the line down onto the page. Now, looking at the side profile, we can see we've got a height of this. So the height is very similar to the diameter across the top of the cup, but the diameter across the top of the cup is a little bit smaller, okay? So we're looking at this distance here and transferring this across over here. We probably want to take just a few millimeters off to keep the object in proportion, and then we're going to complete our crate for the rest of the shape. So again, working with these distances, making sure this distance here is transferred across to the other side, and we're making sure that these are regular, because we don't want the ellipse at the top to look sort of like it's not a complete circle. We don't want it to be an ellipse in real life, if you know what I mean. We want the ellipse to be a circle if it's transferred into a two-dimensional shape. So we're going to now bring our lines down and just see where we are with the shape. Coming down like this, and the same on the other side like this. Now I'm just looking at these sizes here. We've got a height of that, we've got a width that's quite a bit smaller, so I'm actually going to bring this up just a fraction to about here to kind of keep the proportions a little bit more similar. That's a bit better, I think, from that point there. Okay, so always useful to correct your drawings as you're going round to make sure that things are staying in proportion with each other. And I'm actually going to draw the bottom of the box as well, so I'm going to draw some lines across like this, again checking that, make sure that things are in parallel to each other, and on the other side there, because obviously on the bottom we're going to have this diameter, this smaller diameter at the base of the shape, which I'm going to work out first, and then we're going to do our diameter on the top as well that it's going to go up to. So what I'm going to do is start by working out where my centre point of my diameter is going to be on the bottom. So I'm drawing those across the box from point to point like this, and I'm going to draw a line through, dividing the shape up into 8 sections. Now my diameter along the top there would be going around and crossing through all these points here, because it's going to be the full size of the square that I've just drawn. We said in proportion, the distance at the bottom there, the distance at the bottom there on the shape is around about just under half, maybe just over a third actually, of the height of the top. So I'm going to be estimating this. Now if that's obviously half that distance there, okay, we probably want to come in just a fraction, I'll probably say to around about that point, and transferring that measurement out so it's symmetrical on each side, and also out this way as well. So I'm estimating these shapes. Now by drawing my first line in, let's say this one here, we can check that we've got it in the center as well, because it should touch these diagonals that I've drawn. You can see I've gone a little bit out there, okay, but just practicing this, there we go, I'm more accurate on that side than I was on the other side, and again on this shape as well, a fraction out there. But we're saying that is going to be our bottom diameter. Now when we're constructing the diameter, we mark that point around about 2/3 of the way around the shape, and then again we practice putting our curve in. You can never get enough practice in my opinion, for drawing ellipses. I'm by no means an expert at this, and I can always practice, but some people can do this much more confidently and don't need anywhere near the amount of construction that I'm doing. But I think the construction is useful as a starting point to make sure that you're familiar with what it should look like, and then eventually your eye will get better at seeing what an ellipse should be. So what I'm now going to do is do my draw my diameter for the top. So I'm doing the same sort of process, making sure these lines are parallel with each other as I'm going round the shape, and then plotting in roughly where my top ellipse is going to be. So again, making sure it's touching these points. A common thing we see people do when they first start drawing is they tend to flatten off shapes, and it's that urge to do that is quite tempting, unfortunately. But we have to make sure that we get that bulge really coming out to around about, as I say, that 2/3 point on the line, and really practicing using that. Okay, now you can, where this is touching the line, you can inference these measurements across if you want to check that you're kind of in the same sort of point, to make sure that your ellipse is staying regular. This is another useful thing to kind of work on as you're building up your skill levels. But you can see that's kind of touching those points there fairly accurate, so I'm quite happy with that, and I can always tidy it up later. Now we can see, going back to our two-dimensional drawing of the shape here, this comes down about 2/3 of the way before it effectively starts coming into that bottom radius. So I'm going to draw my line down like this, and the same on the other side like this. Just bringing some lines down before I start measuring. Now there's my overall height. Around about 2/3 of the way is around about here. So at that point I can come in at this point and see where it's kind of touching that point there. So at that point there it's going to start bottoming out and start coming round again, and I can transfer this measurement across to the other side by just going across the shape like this and across the shape to the other side. So we can see that distance there should be equivalent to this distance here. Now we said this was a fairly regular curve like this, so what I'm going to do is just plot this in, just practice that shape and just round off that bottom edge like this, and that creates the bottom part of my mug there. And again the same sort of curve on the other side, so we're making sure, practicing this shape where it's touching that shape there, okay, and coming around the shape like this. So there we go, we've got our basic kind of mug shape plotted out. We're now going to move on to the handle. So we know the handle is, in this case I've placed it on this side of the shape for ease of the drawing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is work out where the centre of the handle is going to be. So on this side profile, I'm just breaking this down into two sides by drawing a cross as I would on the top, and this works out my centre point there for the centre of the mug. So it's breaking this down here. You can see it lines up there, so it's a good way to check that these are all accurate on the side as they are on the top. Now we can see the actual handle, this part of the handle here is, I think we said it's around about 2/3 of the overall cup size in complete height, and although it starts a little bit lower, it actually comes up and works close to the top of the height as well. So I'm just going to bring my first line coming out here like this as to where the handle is going to be. So that point there I'm going to say is the highest point on the handle, and I'm just drawing a line across like this to indicate that across the drawing. Now we've got to think about as well the proportion, the width of the handle there in relation to the width of the overall cup, and I'm estimating this a little bit, but I'm going to say it's going to be around about that sort of distance there, and I'm checking that these measurements are sort of just by eye, but checking these measurements are kind of equidistant from that centre point there on the actual mug itself. So those 2 points, I'm going to come out and do 2 lines to show 2 sides of the handle like this. So I'm quite happy with that in terms of that proportion to the rest of the overall cup. So I'm going to bring a line down now for the side like this. Again, I'm looking at that vertical line, trying to get this accurate like this. And we said the handle, the total handle, if we was going to draw a crate or a box around it, is about 2/3 of the overall height. The overall height being this, so 2/3 being about that sort of distance, coming to about here on the cup. And I think we said as well it's around about where the curve kind of starts. So at this point here is where it kind of roughly sort of touches. There we can see it does kind of line up at that point. So at that point now I'm going to come out again, making sure my angle is parallel, and come out like this from the actual cup itself there and there. Okay, now the cup handle is sticking out, so again another important proportion to get right is how far does it come out. Just looking at that, roughly speaking, again it's just under half of the overall size of the cup, which is kind of this distance here. So half is be about there, it probably comes out to around about there, and this final measurement therefore constructs the side of the first crate there. And I'm just going to fill in the rest of this crate because it's useful to see the 3D space that handle will completely take up. Now, as we said, the handle starts a little bit lower and then it comes up high. So I'm going to say it starts around about here before going higher into the shape like this. It then touches around about the centre point of the box here before coming down in a fairly regular arc like this. So I'm just going to draw that first curve in. I think it does flatten just slightly as it touches the cup there, but I'm quite happy with that part there. Now at the bottom part of the cup handle, we can see it kind of billows out a little bit and then goes quite flat with the object. So we've got a section there that's quite flat with the object like that. It doesn't change too much before creating a sort of slightly flatter, I suppose, curve, and then coming up just at the end to kind of touch with the cup. So there's my first curve, and now I need to inference these points across to the other side of the rectangle. So I'm just drawing a line there parallel and dropping down. We can see that point is inferenced there where it comes across to the other side of the mug. I'm going to do other points there, so that's touching the top of the crate, and that films my first curve. Again, checking that these curves are similar to each other as they go round. We can now see another important point is probably where it touches, or where it completes its arc for the top surface there. So there we go, just completing that arc there. That arc should be absolutely parallel with that inside line like this. And at this point, here's where it kind of disappears on the isometric sketch. So that last point there is effectively where we can't see any more from that side. Okay, we now have to go inside and decide upon our thickness for the actual handle. Now it starts a little bit thicker, kind of about here, before tapering in and going to the thinner size of the actual handle going round. So I'm just going to be transferring that all the way around like this, following the outer profile, trying to keep that equidistant. And then we've got the same sort of thing happening on the inside, where it forms quite a sort of a bulged area where it touches the inside shape of the cup before flattening out again, and then again going equidistant with the edge for the majority of the thing. So we've got the inside view there and the outside view, and obviously this distance here, I'd say it's maybe a little bit wider than I'm liking, but we're going to use that distance, and we're going to just transfer that line down like this so I can see where that's going to be touching on the inside of the cup before transferring again this curve, trying to transfer that curve across as accurate as I can on the inside. The final thing I might do is just work out the kind of wall thickness of the actual cup, or to show the wall thickness of the cup. So what I'm basically doing is just transferring another line that is going to be equidistant from the outside of the cup to the inside. So I'm just drawing these lines round like this. And again, it's quite difficult with this camera setup here, because I'd like to be able to move the paper around. I always advise to move the paper because you can't move your hand around quite as easily, but to get these lines much more cleaner. Now I'm just going to go through around the outside edges here, just with a slightly thicker line, give a bit of line thickness, line weight, so that you can kind of see the important things. And then I'll do a video probably on line weights and where to place different line weights and stuff on drawings to make them kind of punch from the page, pop out of the page as they're going forwards. But we're just going to go around this. Again, I'd like to be using my arm more rather than doing this, using my wrist quite so much as I am at the moment, but it's very, very difficult when you're not moving the page. So again, there's another tip from me effectively, is to move the page round, not to move your arm around when you're kind of sketching like this. But there we go, I'm just going to go around some of these last final details before we finish our sketch. And there we go, we've got a fairly accurate depiction, I think, of our mug there. Isometric has its limitations, obviously, because we can only see it in the view that we're kind of seeing it in, and this is where it's sometimes useful to move on to sort of like a 2-point perspective drawing, because obviously you can then decide whether you want to show the cup in terms of like the top and the bottom, because then you can show that tiny little ridge at the bottom there and how that kind of relates to the overall shape of the cup. But we're focusing on isometric first because I think it's a useful way to structure your sketches going forward. So have a go at that, and good luck.